You may not realize it, but you hear a portion of today's reading from 2 Corinthians nearly every Sunday here at First Presbyterian Church in Tyler. See if you can pick up on it. I'll give you a hint. The liturgist says it when we invite the congregation to pass the peace of Christ with one another. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Monday, June 2nd, 2025. Paul writes in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, "From now on, therefore, we regard no one from a human point of view. Even though we once knew Christ from a human point of view, we know him no longer in that way. So if anyone is in Christ, there is a new creation. Everything old has passed away. See, everything has become new. All this is from God, who reconciled us to himself through Christ, who has given us the ministry of reconciliation. That is, in Christ, God was reconciling the world to himself, not counting their trespasses against them, and entrusting the message of reconciliation to us. So we are ambassadors for Christ, since God is making his appeal through us. We entreat you, on behalf of Christ, be reconciled to God. For our sake, he made him to be sin who knew no sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God." Okay, so what we say on Sunday is not an exact quote, but it faithfully echoes this passage. We say, "Friends, in Christ we have been reconciled to God. In Christ we have been reconciled to one another. Indeed, Christ has entrusted to us the ministry of reconciliation." In this brief passage, Paul manages to encapsulate much of the Christian message as well as the meaning of the Christian life. The message is simply this: in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, God has accomplished what we on our own could not. No matter how hard we try, we simply cannot on our own bridge the gap between God and us caused by our insistence on living life on our own terms rather than living in obedience to God. And because God has done this for us, we are called to bear witness to this redeeming and reconciling love of God, both by what we say and by what we do. You might think of this as a cross-shaped message, where the vertical element of the cross reminds us that in Christ we have been reconciled to God, and in the horizontal arms of the cross we are reminded that we are to be reconciled with one another. Here's how that works. In his life, Jesus showed what it means to live in perfect obedience to God. He prayed to God constantly. He gave thanks to God for all things. He worshiped God continually, both in his daily living and in his routine attendance in both synagogue and temple. His life was oriented to God as the source of his strength and the center of his very being. Everything in his life, his words and his actions, pointed toward God, showing us what it looks like to live in right relationship to God. In his suffering and death, he once again demonstrated perfect obedience to God, surrendering his own will to that of the Father. "Not my will, but thy will be done," he said in his prayer at Gethsemane. He didn't wish to die, but his obedience to the Father compelled him to face it nevertheless. In the life of Jesus Christ, we also see the pattern for faithful life in proper relation to one another. He treated all whom he encountered with the kind of love that God has for all creation. Not a love that uncritically accepts everything people do, but not letting people's failures become a barrier to God's love or ours. But he does more than model true human life for us. He also entrusts to us the message and ministry of reconciliation. Paul could have stopped with the bold affirmation, all this from him who reconciled us to himself through Christ. But he continues the very same sentence with the affirmation, God has given us the ministry of reconciliation. It is never enough for Christian people to simply abide in God's love as if it were a private experience. We are called upon to invite others into this cross-shaped way of life, living in right relationship with God and in appropriate relationship with one another. It cuts to the very core of Christian faith and life. Tomorrow, one of Paul's most difficult, misunderstood, and misinterpreted thoughts. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.